Today we're going to be looking at how you can create your very own e-commerce image search application in Google Colab. Let's dive straight into it. Okay, so we are in the Google Colab notebook. Now I'll put a link to this in the description and in the pinned comment so you know where to access it and you know where to get set up and start coding. So this first section here is basically just explaining that we're going to be building an image search application specifically for e-commerce, and the embedding models that we're going to be using for this search application are Marqo's new state-of-the-art e-commerce embedding models. Now this is the Hugging Face collection that Marqo have released. As you can see, they have their two models here. They have some evaluation data sets and some Hugging Face spaces so you can try out the models yourself. But what's really important about these models is they are state-of-the-art, and these models have incredibly high average improvement over some very well-known models, both open source and private as well. So that's why we're going to use them in the search demo today. So that's a little bit of background about the embedding models that we're going to be using. Now this search demo will be using Marqo Cloud, but you can actually also use Marqo through Docker, and I'll be explaining how you can do that in a separate video, so subscribe so you don't miss out on that video. Like I said, we're going to be using Marqo Cloud for the search engine and then Marqo's state-of-the-art embedding models for the e-commerce embeddings. So that's a bit of background about what we're going to be doing in this video. Something to note is if you have any questions at all, if you struggle with anything or you need guidance, please join our Slack community where myself or another Marqo member will be happy to help you out and get this up and running for you. Hopefully, fingers crossed, if you follow everything in this video, you'll be fine. But if you want to join the community anyway and have really nice machine learning and AI discussions, then feel free. The link is here and it will be in the description and pinned comment of this video. So the first thing we want to do is set up a Marqo index. Now this index is going to host all of the documents that we want to search over, and it will also handle the embeddings for us as well. So that's what's great about Marqo, is it's an end-to-end platform. So it handles both the embedding generation and the search side as well. And yeah, it's fantastic. So the first thing we want to do is install relevant modules. So we're going to install Marqo and Pandas for this tutorial. Now, while we're doing that, it's important to note that we have to set up a Marqo API key, which is mentioned here actually. So to obtain that, we're going to head to this article, which is find my API key. I actually have it up here anyway, but I'll cross off that. So to find your Marqo API key, it says the first step is to sign up or log into Marqo Cloud. Now I have already done that. If you head to Marqo Cloud, you can see I'm already logged in, but all you do is you'll be greeted with a screen similar to this. Follow up the steps to sign up to Marqo Cloud, and once you've done so, your Marqo Cloud will look very similar to mine, except you won't have indexes in here yet if you haven't created any already. So this will be empty, but this is where your indexes will be created, which is what we're going to do now. So the first thing, like I mentioned back onto the Colab, is that we need to find our API key, and that's so we can access Marqo Cloud and create an index. So to do so, we head to API keys in Marqo section. Now when you sign up to Marqo, you will be given a default API key. You can add new API keys, call them whatever you'd like in here, but I just use the default. So I'm going to copy my API key, and now we're going to head back to the Colab. So what you want to do here is you want to create a secret variable in Google Colab, and that allows you, it's very similar to having an environment variable locally .env file. You want to put your Marqo API key that you've just copied from Marqo Cloud into secrets. Now what you'll do is you'll head to secrets here, and I won't click on it because it will show you my secrets, my API keys, but you'll head to secrets here, you'll create a new secret called Marqo API key like this, and then you'll copy your API key that you've just taken from here. Fantastic. And when you run this, this should run successfully because it will recognize your API key, and this section here just sets up the Marqo client. Fantastic. Now, if you have any issues with this, feel free to send a message on the community and we'll be more than happy to help out. Cool. Now, the next step is we want to define our index settings. So this is where we can define what embedding models we want to use, some properties about the embedding models, what inference types, and so on and so forth. So I've put two different settings here, and these are for the two different models that Marqo released, their embedding model, that is. So if you head to their collection, you'll notice that they have two embedding models here, so B and L. For this video, we're going to be using L, so you can run both of these or whichever one you'd prefer, but we're going to stick to L. So what this does is it just defines the settings. We're saying that we want a unstructured index because we have unstructured data. The model we're going to use is this, as you can see on Hugging Face. And then the model properties are just the name. So we have from Hugging Face, this is the name. Its dimension size is 1024, and the type of model it is open clip. Now this is really important, this treat URLs and pointers as images. Make sure this is true because otherwise your embeddings won't be great and it won't treat any URLs that you input, which is what we're going to be using for this demo obviously. So ensure that is true, and then here you can specify your inference type for Marqo Cloud. This is just for Marqo Cloud, and if you want to increase it even further you could put Marqo GPU here, but for this video we're just going to do Marqo CPU.large. And we're going to run this. So this is, yeah, fantastic, run straight away. Create our settings, and now we want to create the index. So if I just go through what this is doing, I'll run it and then go through what this is doing. So firstly, we're defining an index name. So Marqo ecommerce search, and this is, you can name this to whatever you'd like, but this is what will be defined in Marqo Cloud. What this second part here is saying is we're going to try and delete this index if it already exists on Marqo Cloud, and if it doesn't, then pass, and then finally create the index. The reason for this is because if you have an index on Marqo Cloud under the same name already, then it'll throw an error and say, well, you already have this index. So it's a bit of tidying up here. Just make sure that when you define your index name, it's not the same as a previous index unless you want that previous index deleting. So that's just a bit of housekeeping here. And as you can see, we are creating the index. And if we head over to Marqo Cloud, just cross off that, go back to our indexes, you'll see we have a new index being created. It says here, creating, about 5 minutes remaining, and great, we are creating our first index. Now if we head back, the next step after our index is created is to add documents to the index, and so that's what we'll be doing next. And I'll come back to you once our index is successfully created and ready to add documents to. Okay, so as we can see, we have our index is now ready to use, and if we head back to our Colab, you'll notice that when we scroll down, it says that our index is ready and it is successful. So now we can start adding documents to it. So this little section is just basically saying what the UI will look like, but we've already seen that, it looks like this. And then the next step, as I mentioned, is adding documents to the index. So what we're going to do is we're going to get a file, a CSV file from our GitHub. Now here is the GitHub for this search demo. I've created a separate video on how you can clone this repository and start doing things outside of Google Colab. So if you're interested, then check out that video. But we're going to be taking the data from this repository, and we're going to be taking this data here. Now we obviously can't really see it because it's a bit too big, but if I go to this repository locally on my laptop, this is what the dataset looks like, and we can see here. So we have query, title, image, and score. Now this dataset is a subset of the Marqo Google Shopping 10 million dataset, which we can actually find on Marqo's Hugging Face. So head to Marqo's Hugging Face, and the dataset is here. So this CSV is a subset of this dataset. So we're going to be adding these documents to our index. Now, first obviously we need to download the dataset to Colab, so we'll run this. All this is doing is making a folder called data, downloading this CSV to the data file, and then we're going to load it using pandas, which is this section here. Now what we're going to do is format the data in a way that Marqo likes it. So basically in dictionaries. And so we're creating a dictionary with image URL, query, title, score, corresponding to each of the rows here. And so it's really important that we write it in this format so Marqo can accept it. So if we click run, it's going to take the data and it's going to write it in this format. Now we want to add the data in batches to our index. For the sake of this video, what I have done is I've said we're only going to add 10 documents to the index. And the reason for that is because obviously in Colab we want to run sequentially, And so if you add 100,000 documents in here, it's going to take a while before you can then load the UI. In Colab, that is, you can create a separate Colab and run the following code here to launch the UI while documents are being added. But for the sake of this video, I just wanted to have it sequentially so you can see what happens. If you're interested in seeing how you can run them parallel, then I'd recommend you check out the GitHub version of this video that I've done on this channel. So head over and watch that if you're interested. But we're just going to take n, which is 100 number of documents, and we're going to add them to our Marqo index. Now the important thing here is this section, and this is where we're adding the documents. So we're adding the batch, which we've defined here. So we select a batch of documents from this document here that we've already formatted that Marqo likes. Then we are doing it in batches, and our batch size is 64. So we say that our client batch size is batch size, which is 64. And then this is really important, these two lines here. So we have mappings and we have tensor fields. What this section is saying is we're defining a multimodal field combining images, titles, and that should actually say queries in there, not categories. I'd used a previous dataset before, which is why we had categories in there. But yeah, we want to create a multimodal field which contains images, which we can see here, titles, which we can see here, and queries, which we can see here. And for each of these, we assign a weight to each of the fields. And so we weight images to be more important here with a value of 0.8, and queries and titles have 0.1 each. So that's what the mappings does here, creating a multimodal field. And then we're saying that this is what we want for the vector or tensor generation, and it's this multimodal field here. So this is really important for adding the documents. Now, if you have any questions about any of this, how to set up certain indexes in Marqo, please join our Slack community where a member of our team will be more than happy to help out. So if we run this, so this section is adding documents to our index, and when we head back over to Marqo Cloud and refresh, hopefully when these documents are added to the index, we'll see them populated in here where it says document count. Of course, we have 0 for now because the documents haven't added yet. This terminal will soon populate saying that we've added documents. Cool, so we had batch 0 and we've indexed 64 documents. So hopefully if I refresh here, we should have 64. There is sometimes a bit of a time delay between when we add them and seeing them in Marqo Cloud, so that is expected. After a bit of time, we should see the document count go up. Refreshing, we see the document count has gone up to 64, and perfect, it's added another 64 documents in here. And if we head back to our cloud platform, we can see we have 2 lots of 64, 128 documents added into here. Perfect. Now the n equals 100 here is basically saying the limit at which we want to loop through batches. So it's obviously done another 64 in here because 64 plus another 64 is 128. And so we've said up until 100, process the next batch. And so that's why we have 128. Perfect. Now this next step is optional, is how you can monitor your index statistics. And all it's going to do when I click run, it's just going to look at the index that we've created and tell you how many number of documents you've got and number of vectors, and then a little bit about the back end as well. Cool. That's optional. I find it really helpful when I'm adding documents because obviously what you would ordinarily do is add documents in one terminal, in another terminal. I'd then check and see the status of that either here or on Marqo Cloud, like I said, because you can see the same on Marqo Cloud, and then another terminal for launching the app, because your app can work and you can call and you can search from your index while you're adding documents to it. And yeah, so pretty cool. Now the next step is to build the user interface. So this step is to define the search function, and all this is doing is we're going to take a query, so we're going to input a query when we're searching. We're going to also optionally give themes and negatives, so if you want more of something or less of something, that's what we can do here. With those, we then create the weights, so the query weights here, so weighting it depending on if we have more of or less of in here. And then these query weights will go into our search function, and so we will search over the index with these query weights, and we're going to return the top 10 results from this Marqo index. So again, all this is doing is taking the Marqo index that we have, so your name would be in here, we're searching over that index with these query weights and returning the top 10 results. And this little section here is basically just processing these results so we can display them in Gradio. And perfect, that's what that function does. The next function, so let me just run that. The next function here, we need Gradio obviously, so we're going to pip install Gradio. But if I scroll down, this section here is very, very simple. It's launching the Gradio app itself. And all this is saying is we're going to have some text at the top, which is multimodal e-commerce search with Marqo. We're going to have query, themes and negatives, inputs, and they're each going to be text box. So you can input your search query, what you want more of and what you want less of. Then we're going to have a search button and it's going to be orange. And then we're going to have a results gallery, and this gallery will show the top 10 results from Marqo. And then this section here is just setting up the click functionality. So the function used here is the search function that we've defined, and the inputs are going to be this query input, the themes, the negatives, and outputs we're going to return that to the results gallery, which is here. And then we just launch the app, and it's as simple as that. So now if we click run, what will happen in Google Colab is you'll get a temporary, I think it's maybe 3 hours, it'll probably tell us in just a moment, 72 hours, 3 hours is way too little, 72 hours, and this is a public URL for our Gradio app. So we can click on this and it should load and populate with what we want. Amazing. Now this is obviously very, very simple. We do have almost a replication of this search on Hugging Face itself. So if I head back to Marqo, go to our collection, we have an e-commerce search Hugging Face space here that you can play around with. So this is what it looks like. Now we can type in, obviously we only have 128 documents, so I might search for something, I might just search for an empty query and see what results that we get out from it. Now this will probably just, it'll return the top 10 results for an empty query. This is just so I can see what we have in here. So we've got a few random things. We have a kids clothing, other clothing, Christmas wreath, parchment paper. So maybe if I type in a wreath, let's have a look. Hopefully the wreath will come up top. But the important thing to note is when you're building this, you want to add more documents to your index. And yeah, perfect. So we have a wreath that's come up first. And the second result is tinsel, which is on topic because typically we have wreaths around Christmas, and around Christmas we also have tinsel, and so yeah, we kind of expect those two to go together. We also have some random extra items in here. Obviously, like I said, if you add more documents to your index, then these search results will become better. But I encourage you to go through maybe all of the documents in that CSV or the items in that CSV file and add them to your index. Awesome. Now, the two final steps, the fifth one is optional. Both of them are optional. This one is you can deploy them on Hugging Face spaces. So the fantastic thing that we've done about this is basically the code that you've written here, all of this, and this section here. So the part for building the UI, this code can go directly into an app.py file as part of a Hugging Face space, given that the setups are all correct. And you can deploy it on Hugging Face spaces itself. I do have a video on how you can do that. So you can literally just follow the tutorial that I've done and copy and paste both these text code boxes here into the app.py file, and your search demo will be there. Now, the final thing to note is when you create your Marqo index on here, you're basically creating an index with CPU, large inference, and a basic storage shard. Now this index will cost 38 cents per hour when you run it, which is obviously very low cost, but if you don't delete your index, you'll continue to be charged for it. And that's what this little section does here. We're just going to run it and we're going to delete our index so that we've cleaned it up, and we won't continue to get charged for it. So while this is deleting the index, we'll be able to see that in Marqo as well. We can see that it's deleting the index. Fantastic. So that was the demo. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions at all, then feel free to comment below or join our Slack community where myself or a member of the Marqo team are more than happy to help. And all the links used in this video will be in the description and the pinned comment. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you all in the next one.